Welcome to International Women's Day, and we're turning it into International Women's Month. And the theme for International Women's Day this year is Inspire Inclusion. And so, what I'm doing with that, that's fun for me, and I hope for those who are watching, is I'm talking to women who I find inspirational and who I admire and who, I know and who make my life better. So today, that person is Sunny. Sunny and I worked together at Providence in Seattle back in the day. It's been a while now, like 7 years, yeah, probably seven,
Something
eight
like
years,
that, yes,
something like
yeah.
that.
Mhm.
And after we parted ways and I moved to Sweden, we stayed friends. Sunny's one of my friends who saw me in Sweden, which was really fun. We had dinner. Um, but we've stayed in touch and we've stayed connected. And so when I was thinking about this project, she came immediately to mind. And so Sunny, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the listeners a little bit about you?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me. And happy International Women's Day to everybody. So I'm Sunny Lee. I head up experience design at Electronic Arts, which is a video game company. So when I talk about experience design, it's UX and UI, and that's where I kind of started my journey, was really around UI. But I really do like to say I took a scenic route to my career because I have a bit of a kind of like, I guess, disconnected background, but that all kind of came together in my career. So I have a degree in poli sci. So when I went to university, I was like, I'm going to be either a politician or a lawyer. Nope. Uh, did not happen. And so I went into the family business. And so my father has been an Asian medicine practitioner for a very long time. And he's like, well, if you don't know what you're going to do, why don't you just kind of like join the family business, which went another 3 years of school. And then I became a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. 6 months into it, I realized and I mustered up enough courage to talk to my father about going, hey, I don't think this is the career for me. I love helping people, but I think I need to, I guess my career journey had not ended. So I went back to school again, studied digital design, got a gig before school even ended, moved down to San Francisco, and started working for a video game company, and then moved on to kind of motion design and moved to LA for a little bit. And then, yeah, so I just kind of went up and down the West Coast, really kind of focused on design, and then moved to Seattle where I met you and had that great experience at Providence. While I was there, I got a call. I said, hey, you want to come back to Electronic Arts? Because I had been there for 8 years before kind of doing the shift back up and down the West Coast. And so I decided to move myself and my family back. And so it's been an interesting journey in terms of understanding my passion for design and really kind of building that craft, but as well in parallel, really trying to grow my design leadership abilities and skills.
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. For those of you who don't know Sunny, you'll catch every once in a while, you'll catch Canadian accent in some of her words. So she lives in Vancouver now, and every now and then I forget, and then she says about, and I'm like, what did you say? So, so
Right?
okay, so it shows up every now and then. But yeah, so I would love. I mean, I love that. I remember the first time you ever told me about like, oh no, I did this family business, and I
Yeah.
was like, I'm sorry, what? What are you talking about? So, um, I would love for you to talk to us a little bit about how your culture and your background sort of shows up in that storyline, and even as you've adjusted your career, pivoted your career, how does it show up in your life?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think a lot of it, so my kind of cultural background is I'm Korean,
Mhm.
and I moved to Canada when I was about 2.5 years old. So I'm this kind of, there's always been kind of a duality, but my kind of cultural background has been a really strong vein, especially since um, my parents really made sure that we kind of held on to that and never lost it. I think there's definitely been some things that have benefited me in terms of the cooperation piece. I was always taught there is no me, it's always we,
Yeah.
which I think is a beautiful thing. But at the same time, there's also the sense of always trying to create harmony within a situation, and not speaking my truth, and not trying to rock the boat. And um, there have been elements of that have definitely played into my career, and how I've kind of approached my work and how I kind of like interact like folks professionally.
Mhm.
I think, I would have, part of it is also, I've been fighting this kind of like, there is that stereotype of a very kind of accommodating, quiet, uh, Asian female that is always prevalent and out there. So there's two
Right.
ends of the spectrum. You can be that or you can be the dragon lady. And I was on the nice, accommodating, you know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah.
And I think, a term that I've gotten more familiar with in recent years is kind of like that model minority concept,
Mm-hmm.
and really kind of excelling and being kind of a high performer, and not rocking the boat. And so I think that has to some degree benefited my career.
Mhm.
But in recent years, I think there's just been more awareness. And I've been able to exercise my voice a little bit more. But yeah, it definitely influenced how I thought about things, how I approached my work.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's kind of being mindful of the good things, taking the good things and trying to shed the not so great things.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think there's this element, like I think we know it's very apparent in your story. There's this intersectionality, right? Like there's being a woman, there's being an Asian woman, there's being a
Yes,
woman in tech.
yes,
There's all of those different, there's being someone who has immigrant parents. There's being, like there's this different intersectionality that shows up. And sometimes I don't know that we can like pick apart exactly what shows up um
exactly.
in different moments. And but I think there is this like, okay, this is what I got. These are the cards I've got, and they're good cards. And so how am I going to use them, right? And how what am I going to take with me, and what am I going to say, yeah, I'm going to leave that behind, right? And
Yes,
along the journey, what do we pick up and what do we lay down?
for
Yeah.
sure. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely,
Super
definitely.
interesting.
Yeah.
So I would also just like to understand, like for you, when you made this sort of career pivot, you said like I got the mustered up the courage to talk to my dad about it. What what gave you that like last little bit of courage that pushed you over the edge to say, okay, I've got to do something?
Um, it was just inherently knowing in my gut that this was the right place for me. And if I stayed,
Yeah.
that it would it would be not only kind of like damaging to me as like a person, but I think it could have frayed my relationship with my family, and like just it
Mm.
has an impact when you're not happy in the right place that you think you should be or feel like in your heart you should be. It starts seeping into other things, and
Right.
the unhappiness turns into being irritable to just being a jerk in general. And which I think really made it very clear that this is not where I could stay for the
Yeah.
time being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a great thing to call out, like the ability to say, oh, my instinct is saying this is not the right fit. And you can follow the path down where it could go if you just like power through. Because I think sometimes we go through parts of our lives where we're just like, I'm just going to power through this. I can figure it out. It'll settle out. But sometimes everything in us is saying, no, not this, do something else. This isn't it.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
and not ignoring that voice can be so empowering, but also really hard. So,
Definitely.
yeah, for
Definitely.
sure.
Yes.
So one of the things I wanted to chat with you about is an experience that's kind of coming up a lot after COVID and with the massive amount of layoffs people are experiencing, and just sort of I mean, let's just say it, murder hornets, all of the things in the in the world that have gone on over these last 4 to 5 years. A lot of people are really struggling with burnout or something along those lines. And I know that you've had your own journey there. So maybe talk to us a little bit about however you want, talk about that journey a little bit, and maybe looking back, what maybe some of the warning signs would have been for you.
Yeah, I mean, my kind of burnout journey kind of expand about a year or so, and it kind of slowly sneaks up on you. And I think the pandemic may have made it a little bit more sneaky because all of a sudden my computer and everything were in my home. So my work was never far,
Yeah.
and I've always dedicated a lot of time and energy, and whether I'd like to admit it or not, like it's like work, family, work, family, work, family. So it's always
Yeah.
been like a very, very much a top priority. And it started off with like starting to kind of sneak in extra hours. And then it started sneaking into how I was thinking about like it bled into after hours in terms of like the time, the energy, the kind of like, just the emotional kind of um, investment I was making
Yeah.
into it. And then it became to a point where um, when you start running on empty,
Yeah.
but you're still kind of running, but you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, and that was kind of appealing.
Yeah.
And someone had a really great kind of like you're almost like at the edge of a waterfall, like a duck, and
Mm.
your feet are just kind of going like this, just trying to tread water. And it
Yeah.
got to the point where I just barely had my head above water, and
Yeah.
then I was underwater. And then
Yeah.
the next thing you know, I'm just like, oh, how did I get down here?
Right.
And how do I get
Yeah.
out?
Yeah.
um, yeah, and then obviously had a lot of help from great people like you to help me kind of carve a path back to the light
Yeah.
and find myself again because I completely lost who I was, what I was capable of,
Mhm.
um, and was really in a pretty dark place and trying to make sense of it.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really good analogy. I think the idea of like we're so tuned to staying still and trying to be calm and not rock the boat. And so I think the duck is a good analogy because underneath the water it's like frenzy. Like I'm going under people, no one can tell, right? But I'm going under, and then pretty soon you are underwater and it's just and I think the other metaphor you use there around light, right? It's all of a sudden it's like the lights go out and you're just like, oh man, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this? And I mean, I remember when we talked about, a while back now, it's been a while now, I was like, something's not quite right. Right. And we were just, you were like, hey, could use some advice, and so we started talking, and I'm like, the light's missing, right? Something's, and that's one of the things, like, as you said, it can sneak up on us, right? Like it sneaks up on us. And I think those of us out, that are the people that are watching, I would say, look at the people that you're in your life. And if it feels like the light's gone out in them a little bit, probe, ask
Yeah.
questions, poke, right? So, I mean, do you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. And I think that helped me I guess, develop, like put I guess, a label to it or name it in some way that helped me deal with it and kind of actually look at it and go, okay, I am here. And a certain degree of acceptance, like I am burnt out. And I think the probing and the kind of also knowing that and the reassurance that it's a things aren't that bad, right?
Yeah.
And that you're not alone. And
Yeah.
when you were asking those questions, it really also helped me feel, I don't know, normalizing it a little bit, like
Mhm.
because you do feel a bit of shame around it, right? Like there's just like, oh, she wasn't strong enough to kind of like deal with it.
Right.
And the reality is, like, there are points where you need help, and and yeah, it may feel odd to reach out, but I think it was really important, and it was nice to have your hand to kind of hold on to and go, help
Yeah.
me.
Please help me. No, and I felt the same way. I mean, I went through a pretty rough bout of depression the year before I came to Providence. And I remember being like, I'm not going to tell anybody this. Like, I'm not going to tell anybody that every morning I have to force myself out of bed and I have to make myself shower and I have to force myself into the car, right? Like,
Yeah,
I was like, I'm not going to tell anyone this. But then, of course, the people who love you start to go, what's going on?
yeah,
And you're just like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, but pretty soon it falls so flat
yeah,
that people are like, you're not fine. The people who really, and I do think that burnout, depression, anything like that is so dangerous when it's got isolation instead of us going,
yes,
yeah, okay, let's talk about what are we going to do? What's the plan? Right.
yeah, yeah.
So for you, what would you say has been um what would you say you've learned that if you were able to face this again, that you'd be like, oh, there it is. I know what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just kind of recognizing the early signs,
Yeah.
right? And fatigue is kind of like the easy one,
Yeah.
but also just spending time to reflect of where kind of my energy balance is and where my energy is at, and whether um, whether I feel good or not, but actually taking the time out to reflect on that
Yeah.
versus just powering through. Oh my gosh, I have a like it felt like I was running on a twisted ankle
Yeah.
and I was just like ignoring it. And it really is taking those pauses. And some great advice that you gave me is just really the question of like, how am I taking care of myself?
Mm,
What kind of self-care things am I kind of incorporating into my daily life that brings me joy outside of work,
yeah.
right? And am I even experiencing joy? Like that's also a good indication. Like,
Oh yeah. Oh,
when was
that.
the last time I laughed,
Right.
right? So
Yeah. No, it's really true. Like you find yourself like your emotions get so flat that you're just like, did I used to like things? Did I were there things I like to do? I don't remember. Right.
yes,
Because we can
yes,
get so sort of, but yeah. Yeah.
for sure, for sure.
So one question I've been asking some people, and then I have another follow-up question, but what is going on in the world right now, either in, the gaming space or just in, in design or even just in kind of the world of your life that gives you hope?
Um, I think what gives me hope is seeing, especially I think within an organization like Electronic Arts, and when you think of video games, you think of a really male-dominated industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's giving me hope from what I kind of see from the inside is more diverse teams, more women. I'm fortunate enough to work in a studio where, yeah, I think it's probably one of the most diverse studios I've ever worked with.
Yeah.
More than 50% of my team are women, which is great. And
Right.
they all come from very different backgrounds. And so those things kind of give me hope where um, I see hope in like when I see my niece, right? And she is in a different space
Yeah.
around like how she's exercising her voice.
Mhm.
She's not afraid to be seen,
Yeah.
and she's not afraid to kind of fight for what's right and not and there's just a fearlessness in that,
Yeah.
and so I love that. And also for my son, because uh I have a son.
Yeah.
When I ask him, who do you admire, who's your favorite Marvel character, it's not like the Hulk, it's Captain Marvel,
Right.
right? Or
Yeah.
Miss Marvel is one of his favorite series, and he sees and appreciates the strength in women, and he
Mhm.
recognizes it.
That's so
And
good.
so I'm like, there is hope.
It's gonna work out. Gonna be okay. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And I do think that there's, in my 48-year-old brain, sometimes when I think about video games, I'm like, oh, I do not want to date that man. Right. Like the guy who's
Yes,
playing video games. And I'm like,
in the
no,
basement.
right. Yeah, exactly. I do not want to date that guy. Right. But I do think like there obviously are women gamers, and I think that the more women, it's like any industry, the more women who are participating, the more the games become attractive, and it
Yeah.
becomes something that can unite a community and bring more people of different backgrounds to the fun and to the entertainment value of
Yes.
it. And I look at that and I think, it was the same thing years ago when I worked in e-commerce, and it was like, okay, women are buying everything, but the design is around a male consumer, and you're like, okay, why? And it's still that way in a lot of ways. But
Yep.
I think this is a space where obviously the more diversity you have on the team, the more the diversity shows up in what you produce, I would assume.
100%. And I had a great mentor in the video game industry, and she said, game makers, the games start reflecting the game makers
Yeah.
at some point, right? And so you're seeing more of that, and you're seeing more of like, how do people connect in this kind of virtual space?
Yeah.
And it's more cooperative. So I'm working on a game called Skate, and it's really about reflecting that sense of community and connection and play and fun, because I don't think there's enough of that, but
Yeah.
also creating a space where it's a safe environment.
Yeah.
And and people, that there's just more acceptance of being different, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. And I think that's so, so, so important. And I'm glad you're able to be on that particular kind of team. So that's super
Mhm.
exciting.
Yeah.
So, my last question for you is if you were going to give younger Sunny some advice that maybe would be beneficial to the people that are listening, what would it be?
Say all the things and do all the things, right? And I think it was one of the people will forget. If you make mistakes, you stumble, don't worry about it. People will forget. And it's really about being true to yourself and honoring who you are. And the reality is, the weirder you are, the more people like just accept you, right? And just can see, no one wants you to be perfect and polite,
Right,
right?
right.
Like, honestly, when it comes down to it, they just want you to be you.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that. And I do think that there's a whole, a whole dynamic that women pick up of like, I've got to be this way and I've got to be that way and I've got to be perfect. And really, I was just talking to someone else this morning. The opportunities for me opened up when I stopped trying to be like the men I was surrounded by and said, like, listen, this is how I talk. This is who I am. This is how I show up. If you don't like it, you probably picked the wrong girl, right?
Yeah.
And often the doors opened when I said that, like, this is who I am. And then people were like, well, come on, and we need that kind of voice because we don't have one, right? And that
100%.
that
Yeah.
weirdness, that uniqueness is exactly what people are like, oh, that's interesting. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And they can see the spark in you because I mean it takes a lot of energy to put that mask on in
yeah,
reality.
yeah.
It's a lot of work.
It is. It is a lot of work. And it's like, okay, today I'm going to put on my armor that looks like that guy and that guy and that guy and that guy instead of just showing up and being like, yeah, okay, this is, I mean, there were, yeah, it's just when we were talking, I was thinking, years ago, there was a study about like women with curly hair get less jobs, so straighten your hair for interviews. And so for years and years and years, I did that. And then one day I was like, you know what? I can go to the interview with straight hair, but on day one, I'm going to walk in like this, right? Like it's exactly who I am. Is I get it a little wet, it's going to curl. So, but I think about that in terms of like it's just like a physical attribute, but like what are we putting down and saying I won't say all the things and do all the things because I don't want to rock the boat. I want to fly under the radar. Stop flying under the radar. What does it look like to rise above it? Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
love
not be scared to be under the light,
Yeah.
right? Or be kind of stand out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
No one's gonna come down at you with a mallet, I
Right.
promise.
Right.
Like,
And often if you're the one speaking up, someone else is like, oh, thank God, I wanted to say that, but I didn't feel brave
no,
enough. Right.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's not a game of whack-a-mole. It's
Right.
like it's like if anything, people will lift you up even more, which
Yeah.
isn't which what I learned. It took a long time to learn that though.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Totally.
me.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Sunny, thank you for letting me interview you for this
Yeah, it was a
series
pleasure.
of interviews and for being an inspirational woman in my life and raising a good boy that's going to turn into a great man. I
Oh,
think
thank
that's
you.
good. We
Thank
need them.
you.
So
Yeah.
I'm super excited.
Yes. It was a pleasure. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Of course.
Yeah.
Everyone who's watching, you'll notice in the corner or below here somewhere that there is a QR code where you can donate to the Malala Fund. The Malala Fund works to ensure that women and girls have access to education and particularly even leadership education so that they can become future leaders in the world. So if you'd like to donate, please do. And all the proceeds will go directly to the Malala Fund. Thanks, Sunny.
Thanks, Leah. Bye.